So today we're going to look at firing an output at position while on a path. So we can see a CMO, Copley Motion Objects, is doing some path planning as the CANopen master. And the path is defined by a straight line, an arc, another straight line, an arc, and an arc. It's kind of like G code, but with lines of code. So the path can be defined. You can accelerate, run on the path, decelerate, and stop. This path is repeated over and over, a simple racetrack in X and Y. And you can see the breakdown of X and Y as it's moving. And we have an update rate. I'm doing a 5 millisecond update rate from the world's least expensive Windows computer running CANopen without any real time, just plain old Windows, streaming PVT points down to the drive. Part of the challenge with firing at position is you have to worry about delay times and latencies, and is your master reading the position and then configuring the output to be fired, and all this takes a long time, and by that time you may have already passed your position. A set delay is easy to compensate for, but an unknown delay makes things a little worse, and you don't want to fire the output after you've already gone by the position. So what we have here today is a 2-axis Zenus that's getting X and Y coordinates streamed from a master. It could be CANopen, could be EtheCAT, could be real time, could be non-real time. But what we've done is we've pushed the calculation of the XY path into the drive so that it can determine where along the path the output is fired. So we use a high-speed output, and we fire the output when we get to the position, not just the X position or not just the Y position, but the position of counts along the path. And you can see here an example of a delay, which is like 100 nanoseconds. That's not a very big delay, but the cable length and the transmission of light down a cable, of course, takes some time. This type of delay can be compensated for with an offset. Do it a few counts before or a few counts after. But you can see an XY stage as it's rotating through the racetrack, and at certain positions along the path, it's firing an output which triggers a little LED, for example. One description I saw of this was Scotty with Star Trek. Yes, the equations for transwarp beaming. So Scotty puts it rather eloquently. So just an idea of some latency times, even for EtherCAT, depending on your 100 base T with distributed clocks, even if you had a fast processor, you can use this Acontis calculator to determine the delay, how many axes of motion you've designed your system for, and how many, the process data, the size in bytes of how much data. And so depending on your system, you could have 158 microseconds of delay. And this is running real-time Linux, where Windows is just sitting in the background. Use a hypervisor and run this real-time core. You still would have to, read the positions and then determine, that you want to set an output. And then, there's also a delay besides the transmission delay. There's also a delay, like when's it going to be processed in the drive. So rather than try to do this all upstairs in your CANopen or EtherCAT master, I mean, if you had a centralized controller, of course, you can control everything from the centralized controller, but with masters streaming down cyclic synchronous PT or PVT, you still have time delays for, when do you fire the output. And so those may be dependent, less on the propagation delay of EtheCAT, which appears very fast, but maybe the update rate of your system, your controller. Maybe it's a 1 millisecond update rate. You got to receive the position and transmit. That's 2 milliseconds. And then there's some latency in the drive. Maybe that's an offset, but being able to push it down into the drive. So we've taken the 2-axis drive with ability to receive the X and Y commands. So for example, we're going to write a fancy cursive Copley, and what you want to do is calculate the distance on the path. So after so many counts on the path, then fire the output. And of course, that's a combination. You got to break down the X and Y and determine your velocity on that path to see where you are on that path. So from the master, we just stream at the normal rate the position we're commanding. So X and Y gets streamed down to the drive, and the drive executes that at the right time. And then you configure the compare registers. So there's a count configuration. Is it every 10 counts, every 100 counts, whatever distance you choose. And then the drive will calculate the vector path distance and use that in conjunction with the position compare to fire the output to trigger a laser or whatever you want to trigger. So we'll take a look at CME here is up and running, connected to the drive over the serial port, while the master is sending its commands. And you can see there's the path, the profile velocity of the A-axis. That's the longer run. And then there's the profile velocity of in green, of the B-axis, which is the Y. And it's a short little move in Y and then X. And you can see that along that path, okay, we've calculated the position we're going to fire the output, and at the right count, this is showing every 31 microseconds. So the position update rate is every 200 microseconds. So somewhere in between, in this area, plus or minus a sample here, you get the output fire command, and then the output's held low and it comes back again. And so that would be the trigger, say, for a laser. You could add or subtract counts to it if there's a delay. But the point is, you don't have to run at a set velocity. You can go fast through the straightaways, slow down through the corners. It's the distance on the path that's really important. And in this system, it's a 0.1 micron encoder, and you can see the plus or minus 10 counts of error on the x-axis, and a little bit more on the y-axis. The y-axis is disturbed a bit by some of the cables and whatnot, but still, that's like a 1 micron, a couple microns worth of positional resolution. Not so sure about the accuracy, but definitely the resolution. And then we'll take a look at the note for setting output at position. It says app note 101, but on the web page it's app note 147. So let's take a peek at general application notes. Position set output at position app note 137, and I'll get that updated for posting. But same blah blah blah. We just added a little bit more for XY, and so you have various parameters in the configurator. 0x185 is for the compare module configuration, and this value 4 uses to calculate the XY distance for a multi-axis drive, like a 2-axis or a 3 or 4-axis drive, or 2 nano pluses or AccelNet pluses together with inter-drive communication to make a 2-axis drive. So 185 is the configurator, 186 the status of the compare, the 187 and 188 are the compare values, as you're passing through this value. And this value updates on the fly in the drive based on your configuration. There's a compare increment, ever so many counts, and then there's a pulse period which can be configured. How many tens of nanoseconds is the pulse going to be? It needs to be thick enough to be able to make it down to the device that you're transmitting to, and various modes of going forward, coming back. This is an exaggerated example of extrapolation. So maybe you don't have an incremental encoder, but you've got like a BiSS or a sine cosine, or interpolating the position, and you can see at a constant velocity you get higher accuracy, but as you're interpolating between position samples every 250 microseconds, you still get a count that's fairly accurate based on how much acceleration you're doing here. So this would be the extrapolated value, and a little bit of error based on the extrapolation during acceleration. And that's the latest document for this. And again, it's configured. The compare is configured. So the compare configuration is parameter 185, and I'm just getting it from, there's the decimal, there's the hex version. This was configured by CMO in RAM, so the compare configurator was configured, and then you can read the status of that, and you can read the 187, which is the compare value. This is constantly changing, as you're moving. You get different counts on that. And then 189 is the compare increment. And so this is a constant value. So that many counts is the compare increment. And then the 18A is the pulse period. So that's so many nanoseconds. You got to leave it on long enough for the light to emit some light. So that's a good length of time for that.